Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I want to discuss a topic that I've had people ask me over the years, and it's something that is interesting to discuss with regard to Cell, the main villain of the saga that bears his name. In particular, his transformation over the course of the story, his metamorphosis from his imperfect Cell to semi-perfect and eventually his perfection, his complete Kanzen Cell form. And the question of, could Cell become perfect without absorbing Android 17 and 18? Was that a true requirement, or perhaps through, let's say, absorptions, could he actually become perfect? And is there any evidence in the story to say one way or another? Well, I'm going to break that down in depth in this video using the manga that Toriyama created, and we'll be discussing that as I said before. But before I begin, if you guys want to make sure to see all my videos all year round, make sure to subscribe to this channel, enable notifications, check your sub feed, check my channel, because sometimes I might not show up on your home screen. But let's get the home field advantage by being subscribers. With that being said, let's get into the discussion of Cell's perfection. Beginning with, of course, well, like I just said before, the manga. So when Cell was first introduced in the story, he was, well, fighting against Piccolo, as we could see right here. Now, during the battle between Cell and Pickle Bro, let me make sure you guys could see my cool banner too, between the Natty and Namekian, as Harold would call him, Cell made the first mention of his perfect form. He said, "What you see right now is impressive, but it's nothing compared to if he were to achieve his perfect form." This is where he explains that this is the reason why he was absorbing people in Ginger Town and so on. He said, "I extract their bioenergy and take it for myself." He would then say a little bit more about his backstory and everything leading up to that before using the Kamehameha on Piccolo, and then eventually, being led into the whole situation where he absorbed Piccolo's arm and, then in turn began to explain in a monologue like a Bond villain, or really a Dragon Ball villain, let's be honest, his whole plan. This is where he gets more in depth into how his absorption power works, saying that once he absorbs the substantial energy of Piccolo, he'll be that much closer to attaining his perfect form. This is one of the things that many people have speculated about, if he just would simply be able to absorb somebody or many somebodies accurately or adequately strong enough to in turn be able to become perfect. What happens next? And then he goes in depth even more, saying that he was designed and born of Dr. Giro's computer in his laboratory. That Giro abandoned the project in the middle of it because it would take way too long, and basically left the computer to finish everything else up. And during this point, he goes even more in depth, explaining all the cells that he was comprised of, and furthermore, not just that, but also how they were attained. This is where we get further into the more necessary and important aspects of why he was there in the past anyway, which is that, he says right here, it takes far more than absorbing the life essence of humans for me to attain my perfect form. It is necessary for me to incorporate two essential special life forms. The computer informed me that those two special life forms are Dr. Giro's own creations, 17 and 18. However, of course, as we know in the story, he would not be able to absorb them in the original timeline where he came from, the timeline where the first Trunks was from, who went back in time and created the unseen timeline, and then Cell went earlier than even before him, created the timeline of the main timeline and the History of Trunks timeline that the future Trunks in this storyline is from. So as we see here, Cell specifically says that the computer informed him that he needed to absorb the androids in order to become the strongest being in existence, basically, that he's driven because of that programming and also because the blood of Saiyans, Frieza, and even Piccolo that seeks for him to achieve the greatest strength possible. This is when Piccolo realizes, or, he makes Cell realize that he has regeneration, because for some reason Cell didn't seem to realize he could regenerate. And this is what, of course, is what lends to him trying to put an end to this, leading up basically the new plot of the story to stop Cell from achieving his perfection. And so at this point in time, it raises the question again, well, did Cell basically confirm that he did in fact need to absorb 1718 into himself in order to become perfect, or could he do it otherwise? We do see that Cell goes through the transformation as everything unfolds with, for example, when he first becomes his semi-perfect self, where he absorbs Android 17. And we see a big metamorphosis unfold after he does this, not only in terms of increasing his strength, but also in terms of his body. He becomes more masculine and muscular, and, Harold's favorite aspects of him. It looks pretty cool, especially in this panel that Toriyama drew here on the cover. And we see that he gets a big increase in power as a result, which he attributes to absorbing Android 17 into himself, being able to easily defeat 16, who is on par with his stronger self at that point. Now, with that being said, he also would, of course, go on to absorb 18 into himself, becoming sleeker as a result of this, and once again achieving a brand new form of his perfection, his complete self, where we could see it right here. Sleeking down, maybe because the incorporation of the more feminine, leaner Android 18, even though, in terms of physicality, she wasn't really that much leaner than 18, but maybe you could attribute the femininity to it either way. And the fact of the matter is that he became perfect after all of this. And so, as we could see right here with this drawing, is it possible that this was only because of the fact that Cell absorbed them? Or maybe is there one specific example we could point to where this actually isn't the case, and that maybe completely goes against this idea that Cell presented right here, that he needs to absorb 17 and 18 to become perfect? Well, there actually is, which is during his fight against Gohan, as we could see right here. As Gohan hits him multiple times after he bulks up, and Gohan is a Super Saiyan 2, well, what happens? He is so damaged that he actually spits out Android 18. He regurgitates her, he throws her up, and immediately after he pukes her up, what happens? Cell goes back to his semi-perfect self. He regresses to a prior form. What happens next? He turns himself into a bomb and blows himself up. So you would think that when Cell returned from his self-destruction, he would be his semi-perfect or maybe even imperfect self. But no, in fact, he comes back in his perfect body, but even stronger as super perfect Cell. We see that right here. He even says that he was surprised by it. And then in turn, what does he say? There's a small lump in his head that acts as a core. This is what heals if he's injured. As long as this core isn't destroyed, his body can continue to regenerate. When he self-destructed, he was fortunate enough to have his core undamaged. And he came back, as he says, where he is regenerated into his perfect form without 18 and is so much more powerful than normal, almost as strong or somewhat comparable to Gohan because of his Saiyan cells that gave him a Zenkai boost. So this right here shows that Cell did not necessarily need to have 18 or maybe even 17 incorporated into himself in order to become his perfect body. Now, why exactly is that, though? Because we have to wonder that here. Is it because Cell was getting a Zenkai boost, which increased his power to such a significant level that he became perfect and super perfect just because of his returning from that damage? Or perhaps is it instead because of something else? Now, in the dub in the anime, they say that because Cell had already experienced his perfection, because it was kind of like saved within his nucleus that you could see right here at the core, that it was able to come back as his perfect form, his body, because it had already experienced that before. Now, in the manga, this isn't something that's really mentioned. Instead, it just is saying that he was able to come back perfect without 18 and that he was stronger because of a Zenkai boost, essentially. I actually explained in depth in a video you guys can see in the top right corner why Cell was able to come back with a Zenkai boost, even though it was self-inflicted. And also a number of other videos you'll be able to see in the top right about Cell in general, as well as many of the androids and things like that. So which one does it really come down to? Well, I think there's an argument to be made that might actually be more in line with what the anime said. Because again, as Cell says right here, it takes more than absorbing life essence in order for him to attain his perfect form. He says of humans, but he's also referring to Piccolo, and oftentimes in Dragon Ball, humans or Ningen is referring to any kind of like mortal beings, like a human, a Namekian, Frieza race, anything like that. So the fact is that in this case, it's possible that it's both. That Cell needs, in order to truly become perfect, at least for the first time, to absorb the androids and incorporate them into himself. But additionally, when he comes back from near death, he could still attain those higher levels because he had already achieved them before with his body, and all he really needs to do at that point is to achieve a greater level of strength within himself. I think this comes down to his overall design, because Dr. Gero and his computer purposely crafted Cell to absorb 17 and 18. Now, why exactly is that? Why would Gero want to absorb two beings that were androids that, in his mind, he thought by the time that he had reawoken them would serve him blindly like the other androids? Well, I think that's because the fact that 17 and 18 were, for Gero, just pieces of his greater perfect organism. That ultimately, he just never cared for them truly as like his own children, his own creation, in the same way that he probably did for Cell. And in essence, Cell was probably also a kind of contingency plan against them. If they did rebel against Gero, which they inevitably did, he in turn would have been wiped out by them, but Cell would be born, not even known to 17 and 18 at the time that he existed, and he would show up, he would absorb them after they had finished the job, and he would become perfect and achieve Gero's next steps. And I need to start calling him Gero again, because I remember that's what I'm supposed to call him in these videos. And the fact of the matter is that that is the main reason I think that he probably was built to incorporate them. Not just that, but also maybe it's because for whatever reason, they couldn't just design him as perfect from the start. The limitations of the genetic engineering and of the power that Gero would be able to build of a machine at the time, or even a bio-android or organism, simply could not live up to the power that perfect Cell would if he absorbed the incredibly powerful and also infinite energy-based beings. Even though Cell doesn't have infinite stamina and energy when he transforms into his perfect self, as we see he gets tired as he's fighting Goku, for example, fact of the matter is that he still might have been able to foster that increase in power because of their infinite energy within them. And that could be the reason why absorbing them simply is enough for that. Because the fact that, well, when he absorbs infinite energy beings, or at the very least infinite stamina beings, then that would foster it far more than just absorbing Piccolo, Goku, Vegeta, everyone else like that, even though they were more powerful after the chamber than 17, 18 even combined. So I think that that is another big reason why Gero wanted it to be a contingency. He wanted to be able to have their incredible power absorbed within him. And not just that, but also they were far more capable of helping to foster this. And plus, Dr. Gero's computer probably did in turn have way more capability of incorporating his previous creations into Cell, because the computer already had all of the files and information on them. So maybe it was a shortcut, maybe another thing like that. But I think overall it adds up and makes sense as to why he ultimately needed to absorb 17 and 18 to become perfect. But with that being said, guys, let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Do you think that Gero designed Cell to need to actually absorb them. Or let's say that he absorbed somebody as strong as Super Saiyan 2 Gohan when he was imperfect. He would have just leaped over semi-perfect and just gone full-on perfect immediately. Do you think that the regeneration is proof that he needs to absorb other life, the androids 17 and 18, or that maybe he doesn't need to absorb them in order to become perfect again? Let me know down below. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.